What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network as well as on Vice, as today we're talking Season 2, Episode 7 of Dark Side of the Ring, entitled Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, the Herb Abrams Story. Now, a lot like the last episode I reviewed here on the channel, the John Stossel, Dr. D. David Schultz, Eddie Mansfield, Slap Heard Around the World episode, I knew nothing about Herb Abrams whatsoever. So, for example, when they first announced what these episodes would be about and who was on them and what each episode would entail and whatever, I see the Benoit one, I'm like, I'm very much looking forward to that because I know all about Benoit. I know all about, I don't really know too much about New Jack. I was like, okay, interesting episode. Same thing about, the Road Warriors, which is still to come here on this season for my reviews. I knew about Jimmy Snuka. I was very interested to see that one. The Dino Bravo one, I kind of sort of knew a little about, but, not a lot. The David Schultz one and this one, I knew nothing about. So I didn't really have high hopes, just because I was like, it might be good, but it's not going to be great. Like, it doesn't really sound all that fascinating. But then you see the title, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, and you're thinking to yourself, what the fuck does that mean? And then you watch this episode and you're like, holy shit, this guy was a madman. I thought this episode was great. So, as always, the narrator, Chris Jericho, kicks things off and says that the WWF was dominating wrestling around the late 80s. I feel like they start off every episode talking about WWE and how, they were the conglomerate of professional wrestling back in the 80s, at this point in the late 80s. So then 1990 comes along, and a gentleman by the name of Herb Abrams attempts to slay the WWF monster by starting up UWF. Abrams, they talked about how his enthusiasm was too dangerous. I forgot who said that, but I wrote down that quote. It was about Abrams. We hear from a lot of different people in this episode. We hear from the GM of UFW, or I'm going to keep saying UWF or UFW just because I feel like that's more natural. It was UFW or UWF. UWF. I can't fucking get it correct. We hear from a historian named John Arezzi, it's Arezzi. We also hear from the GM of UWF, Lenny Dudge, I think it's Duge. I'm not sure about the pronunciations and whatever. But it started to become a big deal when Bruno Sammartino said that he would be he would like to get involved. So the historian Arezzi, he invited Sammartino was already at this convention that Arezzi was already going to be holding. So he invited Abrams to come join along, and he said that he talked to literally every professional wrestler there to get them to be on board for this big UWF project. And that was where he approached talent. He approached Sonny Beach, Rick Allen. He's interviewed. We hear from a lot of different people. Rick Allen, I don't know if his name was Sonny Beach. I believe that was another fellow. But we hear from Rick Allen. We hear from Steve the Wild Thing Ray. He was interviewed. Abrams really wanted to make him a star. We hear from Brian Blair, one half of the Killer Bees in WWE. I know who that is. He felt that UWF was perfect for him, which is why he signed. So the UWF, I believe, was announced either at that very same convention or soon afterward, but that was when it became official. And Foley, who was also interviewed for this thing, which is cool because, he was a very big part of UWF early on. He said that it turned into more of a circus after this because there was a brawl that broke out of the conference. Very pro wrestling-esque, exactly what you would expect from a convention announcing professional wrestling's a thing. I mean, I don't want to say we haven't seen that before. They did a press conference for AEW about a year ago, and the Young Bucks got laid out by the Lucha Bros. So I'm not going to say it's a dumb idea, but I guess maybe the way that it was done kind of turned people off on the idea that this guy could be taken seriously. He announced at the convention, according to someone, that Bruiser Brody was going to be one of their top stars. The issue was that he was already dead. He had already been murdered the year before, so it's where is this guy coming from? That was probably the first sign that Abrams was the nutcase and that he had no idea what he was doing, what the fuck was going on. So Foley wanted to believe this fantasy, and no one really knew for sure what Abrams had done for a job. I guess he owned some sort of clothing shop, but he was getting all this money to sign people from somewhere. So we hear from Lenny Dudge. Again, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but he was the GM, the general manager of UWF, both on screen and off screen, I believe. And he always wanted to get involved. He always wanted to do something involving professional wrestling. So sure enough, on October 1st, 1990, almost exactly 28 years prior to the debut of AEW Dynamite on TNT, how's that for timing? And maybe October is like that same time of the year for fall premieres and shit. But this is only a day off from being on the exact 1 year or 28 year anniversary, or 29 year anniversary, I believe. Because this is, 2019 was when AEW debuted. Anyway, so that was when the UWF Fury Hour debuted, which was like their version of Raw. I think it was like a 1 hour show. Fully thought that they had more star power than WWE. There was a lot of star power. They had Dr. Death Steve Williams. They had Paul Orndorff, who was coming off his WWE run. So he had a lot of momentum at that point. They had Cowboy Bob Orton and a ton of others. Blair said that it was a lot looser of an environment over there, not a lot like WWE at all, which was like walking on pins and needles and shit like that. UWF was way more laid back, and people could kind of do what they wanted. Abrams, I believe, they talked about how he met with Vince to kind of have some sort of working... The fact that he was able to even meet with Vince at all is amazing. Like, that Vince would even give him the time of day, as opposed to blowing him off. But eventually what he did when they met was that he blew him off. He rejected him. He rejected his deal to kind of like, hey, if you give me some love in the Northeast, I'll give you some love over here on the West Coast. Not Northeast, but like the East Coast, which is what WWE dominated at that point. Didn't really have as much of a grasp on the West Coast. And, Abrams wanted to help with that. To kind of, it was like a you help me, I help you type of deal. Like, I scratch your back if you scratch my back. Vince McMahon, unsurprisingly, because he didn't do a lot of that back in the day. He did a little bit of it with ECW in the late 90s. But that was about it. Other than that, he wanted no part of this deal. So that was when Abrams really got pissed, and he really wanted to stick it to Vince that, like, listen, we're going to beat you out. This is competition. We're going to win this war like AEW and WWE. But he was acting completely irrationally, unlike AEW and the Young Bucks and Cody and people like that. He was just really, not immature, I don't know if it's the right word, but, like, unnecessarily, hostile in certain respects. He wanted to compete, expand his roster. So we hear also from Marty Jesberg, who I believe was a manager who worked right underneath Abrams. He talked about how we kept hearing about this Mark from where he was previously and how he went to go meet him. And this is where things really start to get crazy. So Abrams brings him into this really nice hotel. And he says with Abrams, he shows up at his hotel room. Abrams shows up at Jesberg's hotel room with, as Jesberg describes them, and I quote, Hollywood honeys. That's kind of like how he said it, Hollywood honeys. It was funny how he said it, but it's so disturbing, the scene that we're about to see here. They're basically strippers or, ladies of the night, what have you, okay? So I guess he said that Abrams brought a mirror with him and cocaine. Like, oh my God, look, this is fucking nuts. And Jesberg wanted to leave. He said that it was a very long night and he couldn't get out of it because he said the hotel room was in his name. I'm not exactly sure what that had to do with anything and why he couldn't just leave and whatever. He said that he was there on his dollar, on Abrams' dollar. He couldn't just leave. I don't know. That just sounds weird. But he knew that if he got busted, he would be arrested right then and there. So when they come back from commercial, Dooge, Lenny, shows off the UWF belt, and he said how the way that Abrams would show it off on TV, he would show off the F and then the U as a way to say F you to Vince. That's so fucking dumb. That's how dumb this guy was. Like, why would you do that? He wanted to squash Vince, but he never had a shot. But they got a pretty big talent acquisition early on, or so they thought. When he met with Andre, they brought in Andre for one of their early episodes of UWF Power Hour, or the Fury Hour, the Fury Hour on their show. And they brought in Andre in like late October of 1990, I believe. And literally right after that, and he even said in an interview, by the way, that he knew that he wasn't in his prime, but it was a big deal to get Andre, because Andre was still a big name, despite the fact that he wasn't as big as he was a few years earlier, and that he wasn't healthy and all this other shit. He was still a very recognizable name. Literally right after that, WWF called up Andre and brought him back to the company, and that was it. Abrams said in an interview, they quoted him here in saying that he actually signed Andre to a long-term deal, but apparently he didn't. He didn't have any sort of deal because he went right back to WWF. It made no sense. And, this is when things start to get ugly. So we hear from Blair, who had said that, things changed on the fly, and that Abrams, a lot like Vince in many ways, did stuff to entertain himself. And that Abrams, more so than the performers and the wrestlers and whatever, really became the star of his own show. He got physical in certain angles, and he really wanted to attempt to get even with WWF by introducing merchandise. Shirts, cookies. Even he had his own cookie, a Herbie, what was it called? I don't remember. I forgot what they called it. Herbie cookies is what they called it, I guess. And he wanted ice cream bars, which is what WWE had. And they were doing, I guess, really well with the merchandise, but he got that from WWE because WWE was doing a killer job of that as well back at that point. So then I believe they held their first major event, Beach Brawl, in Palmetto, Florida. And Lenny knew that they were not going to sell out this building. There was seated 10, 15, 20,000 people. He felt like someone screwed up. He's like, there's no way that we would have gotten this building because there's no way that we're going to be able to fill it. So Abrams, the night before the show, got into the Florida nightlife scene. You can only imagine what that means. And Lenny found him in bad shape before the pay-per-view. He wanted to get him to rehab, and, after the show was over, and he didn't. But the bad attendance for Lenny, or rather for Abrams, really hurt Abrams. It really hurt his morale. And Abrams was doing coke throughout the entire show. He would go into the bathroom, do coke, go back, and you could tell that this guy was on something. He was all over the fucking place. Didn't help that the buy rate was terrible. It was literally like a 0.1, which is either 100 people or 1,000 people. I think it's 1,000 people. Either way, it's not a good number. It was a huge financial loss for Abrams and the UWF. Foley knew that his best intentions, that Abrams' best intentions were not going to happen because the checks for all the talent started to bounce. Blair found Abrams one time in his office with naked girls. He was naked. The girls were naked, and he was doing coke. He's like, what the fuck's going on here? He walked in, and he's like, not that I've never seen a woman naked before, but it's a pretty, crazy sight in your boss's office. You could only imagine, And he said that as the ladies are the Hollywood honeys, as Jesberg said earlier, I sound like that guy from Family Guy. He said that he wrote these women $2,000 each, checks for $2,000 each as they were walking out. So this guy was wasting money left and right, all right? Blair did not know how long the UWF at that rate was going to last, because all of his connections started to dry up. He was losing talent left and right. Blair kept in contact with him even long after he left the company, because he cared about him, and he would see that the wear and tear was really starting to take a toll on his body, and he would see that wear and tear on his face, especially with the coke, and not just the fact that he was failing. So anyway, there was a crew for one of their TV tapings or a pay-per-view or whatever in North Carolina. They needed a check from Herb, all right? They threatened to leave if they didn't get paid. He was like, oh yeah, I'll come pay you, blah, blah, blah. So they go to his office, and they find out that he had the money, but in two separate bank accounts. He had one bank account that was just loaded with money, and another one that was completely broke, that had no money, and that was where he was cutting the checks from. I don't know why he didn't do it from the other one. If the other one was just, I don't know if it wasn't his. I'm not exactly sure. One was rich, one was broke. The crew accepted the check, which Blair said they should not have done, given this guy's reputation, and then all hell broke loose because the checks bounced. And then Abrams, I guess he almost got thrown off the roof, and Jesberg was involved in this, and then Abrams really got paranoid after that, because he was still doing a lot of coke. He thought people were spying on him. He would tear up the furniture thinking there were mics in there. The guy was fucking crazy. He would look through a peephole, Jesberg said, naked, with only cowboy boots on. What the hell? And he would simply say, they're coming. That's so fucking creepy. That's so creepy. Anyway, so he couldn't pay a hooker one time that he was hooking up with. And after he couldn't pay her, I guess she was probably onto him, two thugs bust through the door going after Herb. Then he jumps through the window, naked, with his cowboy boots on. I mean, they reenact this whole thing with his junk, pixelated and whatnot, but it's still just it's a crazy scene. It's crazy even just talking about it, okay? So he escapes through the window naked, and he couldn't pay the hooker, so he called, I think it was Lenny. Or no, he called Lenny, Sonny, he called somebody. Maybe it was Blair, I don't remember. But he was like, oh, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? I think it was Sonny Beach or whatever. And he's like, just go to the cops, get arrested. I don't know what to do, dude. So then after that, the UWF goes stagnant. And then a couple of years later, they attempt to run another show, inspired by WrestleMania 9, which I think was at Caesar's Palace. So they somehow pulled off MGM Grand in Las Vegas, which is, I think, where I stayed, actually. Or I didn't stay there when I went to Double or Nothing last year, but I did go there for Double or Nothing. So I think if it's not the same arena, it's probably similar, if not around that area. He spent a lot of money on talent for this Blackjack Brawl show, which is what he called it. Foley thought it would be packed. He thought it'd be a packed show. He thought they'd turn a new leaf. Oh, that Foley being too optimistic. He thought the crowd, or Herb thought, telling Foley, that the crowd would lose their minds for the fact that Herb had yellow boots, that he'd be wearing yellow boots with the letters UWF on them. Why anyone would care, I don't know, but Herb thought they would care for whatever reason. They talked about how sad it was for the talent to go out there and wrestle in front of 300 people in an arena that was supposed to fill, 17,000 or whatever. It was an embarrassment. He was coked up all night. You could tell from the footage they showed. Foley and Snuka, and I guess Snuka, not even I guess he is. Foley, idolized Snuka. That was who got him into wrestling. They had a match on this show. They brawled into the stands. And he was like, we'll just make the most of it. Who cares? Whatever. And of course, the check did not clear, unsurprisingly. It was a complete failure. But he would tell people, but I had the MGM. And he would use that as like an excuse, like, I couldn't pay my talent, but I had the MGM. It's like, dude, you can't really hang your hat on that. Like, you can't pay your talent. There's something seriously wrong there. They said that people close to him said that he aged 10 years and just 2. He left L.A. for New York to kind of go clean up his act. He told Lenny that he was good over the phone. 1996 was when he kind of turned a corner with sobriety, but then he would disappear all the time. Lenny then heard that Herb died. And he had to go tell everyone that Herb had died, and everyone cried on the phone because the guy was a whack job. He was nuts. It was weird how they went from burying him, not really burying him, but exposing how crazy he was for not paying talent. But he was a nice guy. He meant well, and they were all really sad that he died. And I guess it happened on July 23rd, 1996. It was this crazy scene happening at his office, at Herb's office. So clearly he had not cleaned up because he was having, he was partying the night that he died. He did way too much cocaine. He chased around hookers, and the story changes depending on who you talk to, but apparently he chased around hookers with a baseball bat, and he had the cops called on him by one of the hookers or someone else. He ran into a door and died. That's literally one of the stories that they share here. I don't know how that happens, but that's what they said. The story differs. Someone said that he died of a stroke or something, or a convulsion in jail, or he died in the cop car. I don't know. But his death actually reached urban legend status because no one knew what the hell happened with him. Jesberg thinks that he faked his death because there was this other UWF promotion that was running shows, and someone who looked a lot like Herb, wearing the same boots, who was really short, showed up and threatened a lawsuit. And he was like, that must have been Herb. The guy's dead. And they bring up a great point, too. Foley said that he finds it completely unfeasible because if the guy was alive, he would have been in the spotlight by now. He can't just disappear. That wasn't like Herb Abrams. No way that it was him. Lenny also doesn't think that it was him because he doesn't think that he would stay away from the spotlight as long as he has. Not only that, but he also feels like if he was alive, he would have talked to Lenny by now. And Lenny gets really emotional talking about his good friend Herb. He thinks that Herb would have reached out some way, some form, some fashion to let Lenny know that he was okay. Never did, so he knows that he's dead. Alan said that we actually see Alan visiting his grave, and he actually took his dog. He inherited his dog, who I think was named Koki. Of course it was. We hear from Sonny Peach, who also gets very emotional when he talked about him dying and how much Herb meant to him. And they talk about how Herb should be remembered as someone who tried. I mean, that's one way to be remembered, I guess. And that he got in his own way. Blair with the fucking line of the episode. I thought the Eddie Mansfield line about Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves but not the pro wrestlers was the line of the last episode. We should do like a line of every episode. The line of this episode was from Blair, who said that Herb died doing what he loved, hookers and cocaine. That's so sad and so funny at the same time. So Lenny said the worst thing that he ever did to me was dying, which is, sad because he was really close with him. So yeah, he should be remembered as someone who tried but got in his own way. And Foley thinks when he's asked by the interviewer, by the producer, where do you think Herb would be today if he was still alive? He said, probably in jail. There's no way that he wouldn't be in jail by this point. And that was it. That was the end of the episode. I thought this was a wild episode. You have to see it. If you knew nothing about the UWF like I did, You will absolutely enjoy this episode. Even if you did, you'll probably enjoy it because this shit is crazy. I love that Dark Side of the Ring is touching upon topics that we know about and also topics that I knew nothing about that are wildly entertaining. If the other episodes of like season 3 are going to be like this, I'm very excited for what's to come. I thought this was awesome. I really, really enjoyed this. So check it out right now. Dark Side of the Ring, season 2, episode 7, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, the Herb Abrams Story, right now on Vice. So the next episode, I believe, is breaking down the Road Warriors, if I'm not mistaken. Either that or... I don't remember. Yeah, I think the next one is Road Warriors, and then the one after that was the Owen Hart episode. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to check out all my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews right here on the channel. It's in the description box down below. Click on the link to explore all my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews. And be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Have a great one. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.